Thank you for inviting me on. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
So have I, actually, in terms of what you shared with me about your journey to sobriety. And I think it really relates well to the listeners of Me and My Health Up. We've all encountered challenges during our lifetime, and some of those challenges have, resulted in some form of addiction that hasn't really served us well. And I think for the young generation today, that addiction is vaping, and for our generation, we sort of got into more the alcohol and the weed and the ecstasy pills. But it's I think it's a really important topic to hear a story of success and triumph ultimately over what was challenging you. And I would really love you to impart that wisdom with the Me and My Health Up listeners. But before we get into the topic, I would really love you to share your story of how you have arrived at what you're doing today.
I'll try not. The older you get, Anthony, the longer the story takes. Oh dear. So maybe I'll go backwards. I currently live in mid-north coast, New South Wales. My husband and I moved up here 5 years ago with our 2 children. So we've got almost 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. So I was a late bloomer when it came to having children. Prior to that, we had a gym in Sydney. And we were, just doing all of the things, working, living, parenting, paying the bills and that sort of thing. And that's why we decided to move to the countryside for a quieter existence, a more simple life. We still have a personal training gym up here. We're lucky enough to train people from our home, not working as much, homeschooling. Okay, so I've kind of gone I've gone present backwards, present again. I've competed in CrossFit in the 2009, I think, was the first CrossFit Games that I went to. Competed 3 times in the CrossFit Games as an individual and in a team. I've currently got a podcast as well. It's really hard, because you kind of go down and I'm sure you get it as well, where you just kind of, I'm a personal trainer, but there's so much more, right? But yeah, 2.5 years sober. And I'm really keen to talk about this as well, because I think it's something that more people need to talk about. And, maybe you might not expect that someone who's been a CrossFit Games athlete needed to worry about alcohol, right?
100%. And I think, we when we see someone that's a personal trainer or an athlete, we often just assume a perfect bill of health, but it's often not the case. And I'd love for you to share your story, how it all unraveled for you.
Okay, so I have to, I'll admit, and it's interesting actually, isn't it? Because you mentioned addiction in your intro, and in our normal social setting, I guess, or our social norms, it's totally acceptable to be a drinker. And I wasn't getting up in the morning and having a glass of wine, but I was drinking consistently, and waking up in the morning and thinking, oh, I can't wait till I finish work tonight so I can have a glass of wine. Or conversely, I'm not going to have a drink today. That would be one of the first thoughts I would have. So it's socially acceptable. And so as a personal trainer, working in the fitness industry for 20 years, I was, that's like up until now. But all through that time, I was a drinker. But I was ticking all of the other boxes, right? So I was eating well, I was exercising, I was getting enough sleep, although I would argue that my sleep quality wouldn't have been very good because I was drinking. It was, and my, I had a good physique, I was competitive. So, you okay? I was competitive, so I was doing well in CrossFit as well. So it was like, well, I don't need to drink alcohol. I don't need to stop drinking alcohol. In fact, it was like a badge of honor. I could have a couple of glasses of wine in the evening and still beat everyone when I did my CrossFit comps. So that was where I was at in the early 2000s. And then in 2014, I had my first child, Louis. So I was 40. And so obviously I didn't drink. When I was trying to get pregnant, I went through IVF, so I stopped drinking. I didn't drink throughout my pregnancy, but pretty much it crept back in over time. And then I had another baby almost 2 years later. And so I didn't drink again, but pretty much as soon as, as soon as I could, I was back on the wines, and gradually it just creeps back in and it becomes habitual. It's just something you do with other people. So that's kind of where I was at. Do you want me to keep going, or should I take a pause?
No, I really appreciate your honesty and being so open about your journey. This is really revealing, and probably some people are hearing it from the first time from you. And so I really appreciate you being so open and honest. And I can, like we know from, I guess the law of conservation is, when we're being really good, it creates a licensing effect in a sense. Well, we then we balance ourselves through the licensing effect, saying, well, I'm doing all these things really well, so therefore I deserve this. And we all do it. Like myself as a nutritionist, I go through the same process as to, well, yeah, I've been so good, I deserve an extra piece of chocolate, or and so, or a couple of pieces, or half a block. All right, so so this is not uncommon for anyone, even athletes and those Olympians, or this is what we call the licensing effect. Is essentially we counterbalance, and we restore some sort of, we have this conservation of at any point we're healthy, we're also unhealthy as well, and that constant dynamic is throughout our entire lives. And I've always carried ill health with me whilst I've been doing so many healthy things. I've always had some form of disease with me throughout every phase of my life, and that also plays into addictions. And so addictions don't leave us, they just transform into something else. And so I was talking, well, I have clients that had hard drug addictions, but they've just transformed into another addiction, but that new addiction better serves them and serves their social situation. And the hard drugs was obviously destroying them and their family and things like that. But the new addiction can be, one of my clients, it's Muay Thai boxing, and he's full on into Muay Thai boxing. The previous to that, it was hardcore drugs. And so it's that transformation of addiction. So at any point in time, myself, I go through these waves of my addictions just transforming from one form to another. So I really appreciate your honesty. And what was of I need to change this. What was that moment? And just go through that moment and that thinking process that you wanted to change, and the reason why you wanted to change.
Well, I mean, it was a process, and it was over a period of time. There was certainly always that kind of, well, for a few years, behavior. How does it impact on them? When they're seeing it, how will it impact on them later in life? If they think it's normal or acceptable behavior. And I got more and more deep. Like, you think when someone's a personal trainer and they do CrossFit competitively, they're quite deep into the health space, but there's so much more And and your podcast and my podcast alike really talk about all of those different possibilities that we have for our health and for improving our health. You know, and I'm a massive fan of longevity and health span over lifespan. And that alcohol was the thing. It was like, that was the thing. Out of all of, you know, everything else I was doing well. I was meditating, you know, I was making sure I wasn't stressed. I was going to bed on time, waking up at the same time every day, eating well, exercising, doing all of the things, but I was still drinking. And so there was just this nag, you know, it was like a thorn in my side. And so I got to, I don't even know what year it was. What year are we in? 2024. So it must have been 2022. I'd heard of a book called The 30-Day Alcohol Experiment. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to buy it. So I got it on my Kindle and I'm just going to read it and I'm going to commit to 30 days. Okay, so every day from this book, and I don't have the name of the author, but if anyone is interested, well, I'm just going to go till then. It seems silly to have done all of this, you know, had a month of sobriety and then go back to it just before a competition. And then, so I did that. And then I was like, well, I'm just going to get to my birthday, which was the 1st of April. And I did that. And then there was something else coming up and I was like, well, I'm just going to do another month. And then I was like, I don't want to go back now. And I was using an app as well, which is really helpful. Different things work for different people, I know, but I was using an app and it just counted the days. And I've still got it. I haven't looked at it for a long time, but it's going to be a lot of days. So the more days you have, and I looked at it every day, the more days you have one day, you have one drink, you have one sip of a drink, you're back to zero, right? And I was like, and that for me was a really good psychological, powerful tool. But I got to a point where I was like, people would say, are you going to drink again? And I'd be like, oh, I don't know. And now I'm like, no, because I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back and have to go through that whole process again. You know, the thinking about it all the time. I'm not going to drink today, you know, and then getting to sort of
milestone. I think